High-ranking Gabonese military officers have claimed power after the state election body announced President Ali Bongo had won a third 7-year term in office. Now, the officers who represent security and defense forces in Central Africa made the announcement early this morning. The military has closed the country's borders until further notice and dissolved all state institutions, they said. If successful, the apparent coup would represent the 8th in West and Central Africa since the year 2020. Now, tensions were running high in Gabon amid fears of unrest after Saturday's presidential and legislative polls. Bongo's disputed victory extends his family's 56-year grip on power.
Je suis là, d'abord pour rendre justice. Je suis là pour vider l'injustice. Je suis là pour vous tous. Je suis là pour les affamés. Je suis là pour les mal logés. Je suis là pour les non logés. Je suis là pour les veuves. Je suis là pour les orphelins. Je suis là pour les maltraités.
All right, let's get some perspective now on this coup, and we are joined by the Director for Geneva Centre for Africa Security and Strategic Studies. David Otto is live for us in Abuja this morning. Mr. Otto, thank you very much for your time. Let me get your thoughts about what you think precipitated this latest coup in Gabon.
Well, I think what we know so far is from the military junta that has declared itself as, the Committee of the Transition and Restoration of Institutions. I mean, they're saying that the government has not been respecting the will of Gabonese. Of course, this is in connection to the just announced, presidential election, giving President Ali Bongo 64.2%, as opposed to his opponent, Albert Ondo, who had 30.77%. The election has been marked by irregularities. Of course, the opposition leader, Albert Ondo, had previously declared himself as the winner. But of course, that was not the announcement of the Electoral Commission. So effectively what the military is saying is that the government has not been respecting the will of the people, and that it has now taken power and dissolved all key institutions. Remember that during the election, the government had actually restricted internet. It was shut down and is still being shut down as we speak. They had instituted a curfew to restrict movement. And some of the key media outlets, especially RFI, France 24 and TV5 had been banned from covering the election. So it's another shock. It's another coup pandemic that we're experiencing, not this time, not in the Sahel, but in the Central African region.
All of the elements that you've mentioned above, the blocked internet, the journalists being banned from entering the country, particularly foreign journalists, and then to top it off, the changes that are made to the ballot paper just weeks before election day, all of these, do they paint a picture of a pre- and post-election that could, if Mr. Bongo argued, for example, that were conducive for a free and fair election?
Yes, of course. These were all very key issues that, has precipitated to a point where the opposition has cried foul. Of course, this is not a new tactics that we've seen. And one of the key reasons why a lot of people who, of course, are on the camp of military coups are saying that the democracy that African government practice, where rules are changed in the middle of the game, where, for example, someone like Ali Bongo, has been, has put himself to run for the third term. His family, as you mentioned earlier on, has been in power for, I think, 56 years now. Previously, his father, Omar Bongo, was the president since 1967 to 2009, and then he took over in 2009. So all these, level of complaints and, maneuvering the electoral processes, some kind of not giving democracy the independence of the legislature, the judiciary, and the executive. These are used as justifications, as we've seen now, as we saw in Niger, we saw in Mali, Burkina Faso, in countries like Sudan. So yes, these are all challenges that countries in Africa do face. On one hand, they talk about democracy, protecting the constitutional order. On the other hand, the institutions of democracy are highly corruptible.
Yeah.
And of course, this is leading to a spread of military coups where men with guns, would take over from men with ballot boxes.
Let's talk about the Bongo family, the stranglehold that it has had on power in Gabon, 56 years. Could this mark the end of the road for this family, particularly in the political life of Gabon, you think?
What normally happens is that with every coup d'etat, if it elapses 1 week, then of course it becomes very difficult to kind of reverse. So we're still in the very early hours, less than 12 to 24 hours since this coup happened. But effectively, this was shaking the foundation that the Bongo family has built in power since 1967. And of course, there's a possibility that if nothing is done, of course, I'm not sure that ECAS, which is the Economic Community of Central African States, to which Gabon is a member, has any standby forces that they could deploy to kind of reverse the coup before the military consolidates power, before it gets the support of the population, or perhaps, gets external support. So this is likely some kind of an uncertainty in terms of, if the Bongo family is going to continue being in power after this. Ali Bongo himself has not been very well. He suffered from a stroke. And a lot of Gabonese, were expecting that, after that, he would have given up power to allow someone else to rule the country. But of course, he has stuck to, being on the ballot paper to become the next president again.
Yeah.
So there is a risk, of course, that this is the end of the Bongo dynasty, I call it, in Gabon. But still too early. We're still within the 12 and 24 hours window in which many coups do fail.
Yeah, and we would do well to remind ourselves that this is not the only coup that could have taken place in Gabon. A previous one resulted in a number of soldiers being sent to jail in that country. Final question for you, David. What does this restlessness, particularly in Central and West Africa, tell us about that region? What is going on?
Well, first of all, this is another French former colony. Gabon has been a very strong dependent country. France is dependent a lot on Gabon and Gabon on France. It tells us that the French domination in the continent is swelling at breakneck speed. Former colonies are kind of reversing what they see as France's stronghold. And this is why we are seeing events happening in countries like Gabon. And my concern is that this is not the last coup attempt or successful coup that we may see against the French rule. France has always had this policy of assimilation, which it has, put a stranglehold on its former colonies. And as time unfolds in the 21st century, the younger generation has been inspired to reverse this political stronghold that the French has had in the continent. But again, the key issue here is about governance. The key issue is about the level of economic development that most of these French colonies have been, have lacked in terms of the livelihoods of the people within this continent. So it tells us that democracy it's been attacked. But the reason why democracy has been attacked is because, of course, the actual democracy, the independence of the judiciary, the arms of government has not been enjoyed. in this part of the world. And the last thing, which is very important, is that most of these governments, have used the military and security agencies to protect the regime rather than protect national security. And of course, the beast is eating the one that feeds it at this point in time.
Very, very, very beautiful thoughts there from David Otto. Thank you very much for the analysis of what is going on in Central and West Africa. David Otto is the director for Geneva Centre for Africa, Security and Strategic Studies.